Mount Kilimanjaro. Where did this idea form, Kinnar, to even consider it?
Yeah, so there is a little bit of a story behind it. I'll explain that because that's relevant. I cannot take the credit for the idea. So rewinding back during the pandemic, I know we were all in the home, we were locked in, and me personally, along with my family, were not going out as much during the pandemic. After we got the vaccination, then we did. My health deteriorated quite a bit. I put on a lot of weight and everything. So one of the things I was doing in late 2021, 2022 was, hey, actively trying to lose weight, get better at eating and all that stuff. And one of my really dear friends, I've known him, since college days, and we were roommates as well. He's big into hiking. And he reminded me again on how much I used to love hikes even back in India. And he said, hey, why don't you come hiking with me? And I resisted for a long, long time. I started saying no. So he did something very interesting. He didn't say, let's do the small hikes. He basically said, I'm going to Kilimanjaro next year. Why don't you just join me?
Ooh.
And I'm like, are you kidding? I can't even hike the regular mountains. What are you talking about? But I would say the biggest thing was his belief in me. I know he's a friend. I know he was trying to get me into hiking. But what really helped me decide was just his excitement, just hearing his stories. He shared a lot of his stories on how he'd trekked Everest Base Camp and many other hikes that he'd done. And it's just very inspirational when you hear someone like that and someone that believes in you. And he said, yeah, you can do it fairly easily. So that's what led to this whole thing about me saying I want to go Mount Kilimanjaro, but I wanted to really go with him, which I did.
And what was it in his story that you wanted to have as part of your story?
That's a really good question, actually. Um, when people talk about hiking, it's generally about sharing about what they did. It's a little bit of showing off. It's a little bit about showing their stamina or a little bit about talking about their accomplishments, right? In some ways. Now, the thing I liked about what my friend said was a lot of it was about his own personal struggles to reach the summit and what it meant for him. It was lesser about, hey, look at me, I did this, versus, man, when I was doing this, this was hard and that was hard, but I did this and I did that and I overcame. And it really kind of inspired me to saying, there is so many challenges. We sometimes joke saying, no sane person would do that to themselves to go hike 6 hours every weekend when it's brutally hard, like your feet and knees are going to hurt and whatnot. But one of the sayings my friend said, and his wife, she's also a hiker now, she said something which I really liked was, the person that climbs the mountain is not the same person that comes down. And it's very profound because through that experience, you face a lot of doubt, you face a lot of challenges. So, what really excited me about or inspired me about doing this from my friend's story was really about his struggles on every single thing that he did and how he overcame them. And that kind of became an inspiration for me.
Mm-hmm. So on one part, it was the physical challenge and all that, but on the other part, it was like internal challenge, like a personal development
Yes.
quest. So he challenged you, you accepted. What happened next?
Well, I didn't accept. Just to be clear, there were steps in
Oh,
between. So there were some steps. So
so it wasn't that easy.
it wasn't that easy. Um, it obviously, when he told me the first time, I almost laughed at him. I not necessarily ridiculed him. I know that he's he knows me well and he trusted me, but I was like, dude, I will not be able to do this. So what we ended up deciding, again, he was there with me throughout all the way, was then this was in 2022. So it was 2 years in the making almost, this hike in some ways. What we agreed was, he said he would come with me on hikes so I could gain the confidence. And we kept milestones in. So we had 2 hikes, which were kind of my benchmark hikes. And I said, if I do these 2 hikes, then I will think I'm ready. And he did come
Mhm.
with me. So here in Yosemite, Half Dome is kind of the one of the very prestigious hikes. So he and I went, and it turned out to be even harder than what we thought because it was snow and we didn't expect that. So we did that hike in snow and
Mhm.
everything with him. And there's another hike called Clouds Rest, which is in Yosemite next to it. And I did those two. When I did those two hikes, that's when I knew that I was ready. So it was almost a 6 month process before I could commit to him. It was a 6 month of, hey, let's get yourself in shape. Let's go hiking every weekend. Let's do these couple of big hikes. And then I got convinced. He was always convinced. He keeps on telling me, saying he was always sure I could. But then I got
Mhm.
convinced after that, saying, yeah, I'm ready to go. That's when I committed to him.
So you had to first prove it to yourself that you're not gonna go there and struggle, just at least to test a little bit what are your current capabilities and if you can
Yeah.
do it or
And
not.
there is so much of, Lucia, when we talk about, like, I know in some ways we are talking about this in terms of goals, right? Like it was a big ambitious goal. But when I was thinking about it, there was so much fear in there. Even before I had signed up, I was worrying about failing, not reaching the height. And it's kind of pretty amazing, right? Like I'm thinking of doing some of these hikes. I'm already telling myself I can't do it. I can't do a basic hike. I can't, like, that is completely impossible. All of that negative thought, right? Negative self talk and all of that belief system, it takes a while for it to change, right? And it was amazing with my friend's kind of support and his belief in me, and me achieving some of the milestones that fundamentally changed for me. Even though the actual hype itself had its own set of challenges, but it's amazing when you have a belief, then it's amazing what you can achieve. So it's a, I'm not sure if I'm doing a good job of explaining, but that thing transformed in that training hikes that we did, a fundamental belief change saying, if I can do this, probably I can do that too. I have enough ingredients, and if I have to follow a process, and then I'll get there. So it was very interesting. How do you stop the negative self talk that you have, and how you overcome fear was actually one of the fundamental steps before I could even commit.
So it seems like first time it was the doubt that had to be overcome, or
Yes,
planting the idea in your mind to be able to see yourself doing it. Some people do it
yes,
through visualizations, other people do it through affirmations. You did it through action. Like you had
yeah,
to set some minor milestones, not minor, I would say that. Yosemite is not an easy one, but you had to set some uh, little bit less challenging goals in order to see yourself that it is possible for you. And seems like once you saw that it's possible for you, then you were able to commit to it.
yeah. So in hiking, I think the couple of parameters we're using is distance. There is
Mhm.
elevation that you go, and then kind of the incline or the slope that you go, right? It's a combination of those things, including the weather. So once I did a couple of these big hikes and checked those boxes saying, yes, I have proved to myself I can get here. And that was, but you're right, compared to Kilimanjaro, these hikes were really small. They were, with the intensity, the severity is much smaller. But that's what I think gets you ready, right? Your my mental perception, my belief system changed at that point.
What did you know about hiking Mount Kilimanjaro that before you started on it?
Nothing, literally zero. I had no idea by the time I committed. As I mentioned, right, when I committed to doing Mount Kilimanjaro, and again, my friend's been doing this for a while. So the way he did was he identified a group of friends. So we were 13 of us that went, 1 3. So we were a group of 13, and he created the group, and we would go to hikes together. And that's when I started learning from everyone's experience, not just my friend's experience. Everyone had this challenge. Like when you go to an elevation, what happened? Like one of the girls was in there. Her oxygen level dropped to 64% when she was trekking Everest Base Camp. 64%, that's a red zone. But even then, she finished the hike. And that was so inspirational. Like, I call it inspirational, but it's just, you look at a normal person and what they've achieved, and it's sometimes you can't even figure out all of the strength that they have. It really builds character for you, I think, in my mind. So I started learning from some of these guys on some of the things I was not doing well, or learning from their lessons. So even though I had known nothing about what it takes to hike Mount Kilimanjaro, I had trust that each one of them was actually helping me getting prepared there.
So teamwork,
Teamwork.
counting on someone, knowing that somebody has your back.
Yeah.
What were some significant milestones? I know you mentioned the 2 hikes. Are there any other significant milestones that increase the chances for you to be successful in completing
Yeah.
it?
There were two in particular, I will say. So once we agreed that we want to do Mount Kilimanjaro, and we decided which route we're going to take. So there are multiple routes you can take for Mount Kilimanjaro. So we were going to do the 7-day Machame route, is what it's called. And within that, we had a tour guide who was going to take us. So he and his team were supposed to take us. So we did a call with them, and they explained how every single day was, how much distance we're going to go, what elevation we're going to climb. So we knew all of that like 6 months in advance. So we knew exactly. So what we did was we planned our hikes in such a way, the last 90 days before you go to the hike are intense. Every weekend you are training. And in the training, we had kept ourselves goal, and I had some goals on top of them, which I wanted to achieve because, all of these guys were pro. I was the only rookie in there. So the two big milestones, if I can say, that really helped me, one was, doing consistently more than 10-mile hike. If you're doing less than 10 miles, you can not be in shape and you can still kind of get it done. Now, I get it. It depends on how much is the slope or what is the elevation. It changes based on that, right? Distance is not the only thing, but we did distance along with some elevation. So I consistently was doing more than 10 miles. So if I think back now, that was a big thing for me. It constantly reminds you saying, if I can consistently do like for 4 weeks in a row, 10+ mile hikes, is actually building the stamina, the resilience in me, right? And we did a few of those. The second big one really came with elevation, because Mount Kilimanjaro, the summit is at 19,341 feet elevation. And nobody can go to that elevation to practice. So the only thing you can do is go to as high a altitude you can and really train yourself that your lungs and you can actually breathe with lesser oxygen. And it's a pretty hard thing to do. So again, we found a couple of peaks which are higher elevation. So I think the highest elevation I went to was 12,500. That's the highest I could go. Because as you go up and you're climbing, so anything past 10,000 feet, you can, as the oxygen level drops, your body can't like process that. So your lungs are working very hard. Your heart's working really hard because it's trying to get oxygen and there's not enough oxygen in it. So it's pumping really hard. So you got to train yourself to kind of settle down and still breathe, right? So that was the second milestone. So we went to Mount Dana, which is about 13,000 feet, but I couldn't even go up. I started feeling super dizzy. So, I shouldn't say I got hit with the mountain sickness per se, but I came close to it because I was feeling so dizzy I had to lie down, and that was at 12,000 feet. So that hike did put a doubt in my mind, saying, "Will I be able to finish?" But then I said, "I'm going to trust everyone, and I'm just going to do it." So the two big milestones for me were the doing 10-mile plus hikes kind of constantly. We even did a couple of 15-miler hike, really long, intense hikes as a part of the preparation. And then it was the elevation. Those two things I think were the big milestones. When you achieve that, then you kind of are like getting there. It's like, okay, can't do anything more than that. Now I just got to just do it, right? Like after this point, I just got to do the hike, the big one.
The big one, just so we have an idea, how many miles? So I think you mentioned 7 days.
It was
But
7 days.
how many miles? So tell us a little
I
bit.
think it was close to 35 miles total.
Mm-hmm.
But it, like, to give you a little calibration, and to the listeners also, is you start at somewhere around 5,500 feet elevation, and you go to 19,000 feet elevation. Now, your
Mm-hmm.
bulk of your hike, the first 6 days of your hike, you kind of just get from that 5,000 to 15,000 feet, which is where the base camp is, the summit base camp. You stay there up to 15,000. So what they do is they acclimatize you, which means they'll take you
Mm-hmm.
higher up an elevation, and then you come back and sleep at a lower elevation. So your body gets used to for a few hours, and then you come back down. So you are able to breathe better. So they do that a couple
Mm-hmm.
of times, and then you are at 15,000. But from 15,000, the last night, which is by far the hardest night of the hike, is you start at midnight, by the way. The summit night, you start at midnight, and it goes straight up from 15,000 to 19,000. And that is
Wow.
the hardest one for everybody. I thought it was hard for me. I've talked to so many hikers now. That one is generally the brutal day. So that day goes on for at least 12 to 15 hours, because you have to go all the way up, you have to come all the way back down, and then you don't stay at the base camp. You have to go even further down. So you have to another couple nights hike, go all the way down. So that was pretty intense. So yeah, so just to kind of give a little calibration, is that it was about 35 miles total, and an elevation gain, if you count from 19,000, it's almost, you are talking about 15,000 or 14,000 something feet
Mm-hmm.
elevation you gain in seven days.
Wow. What outside of doubt, I assume doubt was one of the challenges that you had to overcome. Outside of
Yeah.
doubt, what was another challenge that you had to overcome?
Um, Truly, it was about my physical fitness.
Mm-hmm.
I've never done anything like this before. I've never done a multi-day hike, to be fair, even before. Means we did one maybe in the practice session, but this was a 7 day hike. Like, you are living in the mountains. So that was new for me. So one of the aspects I had to get really comfortable with is to be able to sustain this kind of an intense physical and a mental hike over 7 days. And I think
Mm-hmm.
you were referring to, Lucia, just before, right? Everyone does it differently. On that one, I literally had to visualize myself going through those 7 days. And by the way, the way I trained myself is, one is, I talked to the folks who are there and their stories. But then if you go on YouTube, there are tons of people who've done a phenomenal job of video documenting their stories. And they have listed everything from the challenges they faced, when they couldn't sleep, how cold it was, because you're dealing with the elements, right? Like, I'll
Mm-hmm.
put in another saying that they say over there is, you don't climb the mountain lets you climb it. So you are always at the mercy of the mountain. So as much as
Mm-hmm.
people feel that, hey, I summited, no, the mountain let you summit, because the weather there can change in a heartbeat. Now, we got
Mm-hmm.
super lucky. The day we summited was a really good weather. It was a clean weather. So we got sun. By the way, that is the best sunrise I've ever seen. I've seen the sunrise from 18,000 feet elevation, and that's the best, because it's glaciers up there. There's still glaciers. So when you go up on the summit, you can see glaciers. I've never seen glaciers. And here I could see glaciers
Mm-hmm.
very close to me. Um, so the physical aspect of it, again, I know some part of it goes back to belief, is um, after a certain point, your physical stamina does not matter at all. It's all your mental strength. And
Mm-hmm.
it's been a combination of this, I said back and forth about, can I do it? All my doubts, all my concerns. So it was a doubt, but then the physical stamina, and then kind of really driving through it. That's really hard. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point that mind gives up first. Like when our mind tells us enough, we still have a few miles going, or we still have a few reps, or we can still overcome some of the challenges. So if we work with our mind to convince it to go a little bit longer, that we can, that can help you climb the mountain. What are some of the lessons? So you went there, okay, it was the physical challenge, but you mentioned the personal development. what were some of those lessons that you learned that stay with you?
Yeah, one of the big ones, there are a couple of them I think I can share. One is when I did this hike, which I considered almost impossible maybe 2 years before. I started believing in myself to saying, I don't think anything is impossible for me now. And I don't mean in the sense that, you know, I can do anything. But the point is, if there is a structured thought, if there is a discipline, I don't want to start with a fear first, right? You want to start by
Mm-hmm.
saying, give yourself the opportunity by reframing or thinking about it the right way. So, all of these physical challenge, all of the doubts that I encountered, every time I wanted to give up and I didn't, is actually a great lesson in our personal lives because we all know our lives are uncertain. They change so much in our professional lives. You know, we didn't have AI, now we have AI. Oh my God, there's a new technology coming in. And instead of starting to worry about it, I just say, if I've solved a couple of these hard problems, maybe I can solve these too. And
Mm-hmm.
it seems like the smallest thing we say to ourselves, but that non-negative self-talk and even a neutral self-talk can propel you to do so many other things with so much ease in the future. So one of the lessons is I've stopped beating myself up now. I tell myself
Mm-hmm.
there's always an opportunity for something to do because I've done something hard and I give myself the benefit of doubt to be able to do more, right? I think that's a big one. Second, I think it's kind of intertwined in there is fear. I think we
Mm-hmm.
start with fear. We say, "Hey, I'm not," or maybe the other way to say, "I'm not dash enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not this enough. I can't do this physically. I can't do that." Right? And it's been a way to overcome it when you do something that surprises you, something that convinces you. I think I just want to kind of add this in our lives are so busy, and we were just talking about that, right? Like our lives are busy. We do these things for ourselves. We say, hey, I'm taking time out for myself. I'm reading, I'm doing some physical work and all. But how much do you actually go back to your core self and tell, hey, I have done enough, right? And I feel just the fear part of it, or just really reconciling, saying, I have done something really good, something accomplishing, patting yourself on the back, has been kind of a huge change in how you operate, right? I think everyone needs to do that. It doesn't have to be through Ike, to be something else, but really retrospecting on how far you've come, really
Mm-hmm.
knowing and giving yourself the benefit of doubt, saying, hey, there are things happening. Like now, I can see when my days goes off that could be a whole week kind of lost, and I can look back in retrospect, honestly saying, this was a tough week. A lot of things happened. I didn't plan for it. It's okay. I'll catch up next week, right? And that kind
Mm-hmm.
of comes with this constant, tolerance or a resilience that you end up building. And I build it through hiking. Maybe that's just one way I did it. But yeah, building more resilience as well, I would say.
And I think what's beautiful in terms of reaching goals in general is that the lessons that we learn while we are conquering them can be generalized. It's not going to help you only on the hike. It will help you on your next hike, but it's going to help you on your next big project at work
Yeah.
or in your personal life. It's generalized. It's wealth. It builds you as a person. Then
Yeah.
you can use it. You become stronger. And you hear often people saying like, if I've done this one, I can do anything. Like people coming
Yeah.
from, I don't know, war or something. Like you always hear this, like if I did this one, then I'm invincible. Yes, there are some things like there are some limitations, but oftentimes we put those limitations in our mind.
Yes. And the saying which says how you build character, you build character when your back's against the wall or when you're facing a tough situation. Now, I feel like we live in a very comfortable society. Our lifestyles become pretty easy. So a lot of things are easy. You need to be able to push yourself all the time into an uncomfortable zone for you to learn. And that's a part I think I want to make sure I don't miss out. And hiking kind of got me that. It's a constant learning process, but learning in a very safe environment versus saying, "Hey, I'm going to push myself and see where I fall." It's okay to. it's a psychological safety too, but continue to push yourself a little bit more.
I know you're a leader at heart, Kinnar. What is something that you learn in this journey that helps you be a better leader?
Being really humble.
Mm.
I think I touched on this before. When you accomplish big goals, and we do at work too, you deliver a big project, or you grow the revenues of the company. There are so many things you can do. We do some things in our personal life too, right? And the same way goes for this hike. Like, in some ways, this hike was a big accomplishment. But I've also realized, one, I couldn't have done it alone. So many people helped me through it. My friends started with kind of that belief, and then so many people shared their experiences. Second, I had to overcome so many other challenges, which everyone did. So you kind of not just see it from your perspective, you see it from others. And the humbleness, I think, really comes from the fact that there is only so much within your control. There is so much which is outside of your control. Like in terms of hiking, we talk about weather and all of the different elements that you deal with. Those elements are also there in our professional life. So for me, really being humble about knowing what I can change, how far I can go, versus accepting what's coming, I think has been the big learning for me as a professional leader too.
Wonderful. For anyone that got an invitation from a friend to a hike some crazy mountain and they are doubting but considering it, what would you tell them?
Know yourself and just do it.
Just do it. Yeah, the Nike.
91, yes.
Yeah, I have a tradition on this podcast, Kinnar, where I'm asking the current guest to recommend a book that was foundational for them. And I will send that book to the next guest. So I'm curious, what book would you like me to send to the next guest and why?
Okay. You know about this book already. I've shared it
Yeah.
with you. It's Leadership and Self-Deception. That's a book that's been very transformational for me, both personally and professionally. So that's the book I'm going to recommend.
That's a wonderful choice. I read that book. I read their sequel as well, and definitely one of the most foundational books for me as well. So wonderful. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Kinnar. I so appreciate you sharing your journey.
Yeah.
I'm
Thank you so
honored.
much for having me, Lucia. And I should also say, your journey has been phenomenal on how you started, this podcast, the journey to point B. And I think one of these days you should be a participant on your own host. I think we should interview you as well about your journey, because you've done something pretty phenomenal here. So thank you so much for providing such a wonderful platform. I think it's great for leaders and all. I do listen in. I won't say I listen to all of them, but I do listen to most of them. It's always very inspiring to hear other story. We learn from them much better. So again, thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate your support, Kinnar, and I appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Lucia.
I hope this episode gave you some inspiration for reaching your goals. If you found it useful, please hit the subscribe button. This will help me bring you more inspirational stories to support your own journey to point B. Thank you.